state. There are only 1.8 million people in Nebraska, and 1.2 million of them live in either Lincoln or Omaha. So we're a very lightly populated state once you get west of Lincoln, which is only about 30 miles into the state. So you get this sense, if you will, that ag is big here. It's the driver in the economy. 1 in 3 jobs in the state are directly in the agriculture sector. Many of those other 2 are actually in related areas to the agriculture sector. We for a long time have known that our investments in this field are in a 15-to-1 kind of ratio on return on investment. The Battelle work most recently shows the same here in the north central region, and it's been a wise investment. Here's what's really unprecedented for us. Last year in 2011, we had an all-time record high that exceeded the previous record high in net farm income and farm gate receipts in Nebraska by almost 40%. Huge numbers there, $7.5 billion in net farm income in Nebraska in 2011. We expect, even in the face of this severe drought that we're in this year, that we will still be in the top 8 years in all time in history in Nebraska for net farm income, largely because of water and irrigation that I'm going to talk about here in a moment. The bottom part of that slide is another really unprecedented statistic. This was before land went over $10,000 an acre in irrigated cropland in the state, so this number is a little old. But at that point in time, the estimate was in the next 5 years, $8.25 billion was going to transfer generations in the state in land ownership. So it's a really pivotal point. If you think about all those factors coming together all at one time, it's a really pivotal point in land use, it's a really pivotal time in water use, it's a really pivotal time in wealth in the state that it hasn't seen in decades in past history. This is what that net farm income looks like over time. You can of course see that spike in 2011. Many people ask if that is solely driven by ethanol and by the increase in ethanol. It is true that 40% of the corn crop in the U.S. this past year will go into ethanol use. It is true in Nebraska the number is higher than that of our corn crop. The reason being cattle, that the cattle industry is growing, continues to grow. That statistic I showed you earlier is a reflection of that from the ethanol industry. So we're seeing a relocation of the cattle industry in the southern Great Plains into the northern Great Plains. And it's occurring on the heels, if you will, of the growth in the ethanol industry as well. Here's this last year though. We started a project about 2 years ago with Michael Forsberg. Michael's a National Geographic photographer. He's in our faculty, nature photographer. He came to us wanting to put time-lapse cameras all the way up the Platte River watershed. So the Platte dumps into the Missouri on the Nebraska border. So he has time-lapse cameras up both the Platte and the North and the South Platte when they branch to go up into their headwaters in Colorado that were placed there just ahead of the Missouri River flooding a year ago. So he was able to capture, if you will, the river, or the life of the river during that year as well as the year we've just experienced, and you kind of see the play out here. The Platte was actually dry in between Lincoln and Omaha this summer. There was almost no water flowing in the Platte River during the drought. So extreme 2 years here that we've seen between that. This is our drought map. We are dead center in the drought currently. The National Drought Mitigation Center is actually is housed at the University of Nebraska. They have been 24/7 for months in responding to predictions around the current drought that we're in. And we are dead center in it, as this graph shows. Precipitation during the year, the worst precipitation year on record for Nebraska and Wyoming, and one of the worst for many of the states in the lower 48, as you're aware. This is the temperature graph for that same time period. Again, record heat year. I know you had some record heat here also, as the map shows, but March I mean, we had, for the first time in history, probably 35% of our seed in the ground before the end of March, due to that record heat that we experienced back early in the spring. So tremendous, tremendous change in just a 1 year span in the conditions that we've seen. And as I mentioned, the drought team has been busy in dealing with that throughout the summer. Even in the face of that drought, though, I mentioned earlier that economically the state is going to be in actually quite good shape this year because they were the heaviest irrigated state in the country. But I will tell you that I haven't spoken to very many farmers in Nebraska that have not put more than 1,100 hours of time on their pumps for center pivots this summer. They're still experiencing very good yields, but at the expense of, there was a tremendous amount of water pumped out of the aquifer this summer. And if we go through another year like that, that's, is obviously not sustainable. But we are on track for net farm income again this year of at least $5 billion is the estimate in the state, which will still put us above some of the previous records that we had seen. And we all know the impact that the drought is going to have. I throw this in just because my son's working for this guy currently. David Frum was the speechwriter for George Bush when he was in the White House. He now is a writer for the Daily Beast and CNN at Time, Newsweek, and my son's his editor. And he had this article in the New York Times just a few weeks ago talking about what's 2013 going to look like given what we experienced in 2008 from food price spikes around the world and the political unrest that unleashed, as you recall, in Tunisia and Egypt and Jordan and regions around the Middle East as a result of those food price spikes. So we're all kind of eagerly waiting with bated breath, I think, here to see what that impact is going to be. Now I'm going to move now into talking about the formation of the Water for Food Institute and how we're doing that. This is part of the impetus for the Institute. We started having water conferences at the University of Nebraska. Some of your folks here at Michigan State have been involved in a number of those global water for food conferences 4.5 years ago.